What's up? Hey, hello, everyone. Wow. So today we are back going to be talking about Survivor Season 39, Island of the Idols, Episode 8 and Episode 9. So my name is Rachel.
And I'm Alyssa, and Rachel and I have been in pretty constant contact since Wednesday when the episode premiered. And basically, this episode was kind of a clusterfuck. And we're going to be talking pretty extensively about all the ways that we feel this episode was flawed, not only on a game level, but also on like a personal moral level. We're going to be talking about what we feel should have been done differently by players and producers. And yeah, I feel like this podcast is going to be like even more opinions based than a lot of our other podcasts. So please remember we're people too. And don't cyberbully. Like, don't you have better things to do than tell two college age girls on the internet how much you hate them?
Oh,
So, just putting that out there before we get into the like deep stuff.
yeah. And I guess trigger warning as well, like the episode had at the top of the episode. We will be talking a lot about sexual harassment. And yeah, Alyssa and I are in college. And so a hot topic that is often talked about or lack of being talked about in the college and university campuses as well.
Yeah. So, we're just gonna take it from the top and roll with it. And yeah.
So,
So,
yeah, I mean, this I feel like it was an interesting 2 hours, and I can see why they put these two episodes together as a like 2 hour time block kind of thing, because usually the merge, you want it to be happy and fun and like, oh, get to know all of the players coming together for the first time kind of thing. 13 people on one island now, that is a big deal. And then I feel like with the second episode, it was hard to watch. I feel like by the end of the 2 hours, I was like, what the heck literally just happened? And I don't know. It sort of was like, yeah, really difficult, I feel like, to watch everything play out.
yeah, and then rewatching it was also really not fun because it's like that sense of foreboding you get when you know something awful is going to happen, but you just have no power to stop it. So, this is
Yeah.
not a light, happy, fun merge episode as much as I wish it could have been.
Yeah, so Alyssa and I both watched the episode twice now, and obviously now it's Saturday, episode aired on Wednesday. We'll also discuss a little bit in this podcast about some of like the things that have happened after the episode aired, including like apologies that have come out and a spoiler for next week if you all want to know the spoiler, which we can talk about. But with the episode, we hear Kelly's side of the story. We see her crying in a confessional, talking about all of the sexual harassment that she's facing and feeling throughout the Survivor season. And then she discusses how there are consequences because, you know, we're still in a game kind of thing. And then we see the fourth wall being broken, which I thought was interesting because we haven't necessarily ever, I feel like, seen a producer talk to a contestant in a confessional. Um,
I feel like the closest we came to this was when Jeff Probst had them do like an impromptu tribal council to vote off Brandon Hance, like kind of using his producer hat in the middle of the game. But yeah, I feel like we've never had something similar to that where you see a producer like their voice talking about like, hey, we can do this for you. So yeah, it was rough to watch because you don't want to believe that coming out and talking about sexual harassment has consequences. Like everyone wants to believe like, oh, if someone is hurting me, I can say that I'm being hurt without, you know, having to think about what it will do to my game, you know? So that was the beginning of like the roughness of this episode, and I feel like it kind of just got worse as the episode went on.
Yeah, so we also see Kelly confiding in Janet, crying, and then we hear through Kelly that it seems like Molly was affected by Dan as well throughout the time Molly was on the island. And I think after the episode aired, something that has been annoying for me to see on social media is people saying, like, why didn't Kelly speak up sooner, kind of thing. Like, obviously, it wasn't a big problem because now we're just hearing about it. And then I was like, yo, if you're commenting that
Literally,
stuff online, like, we saw it in the first episode that Kelly did speak up. She did approach Dan, and then she still feels uncomfortable 20 some days in. So I feel like I was just annoyed by seeing those comments online.
yeah, like literally the first episode, we see Kelly telling Dan, like, hey, I'm not okay with you touching me that way. Please stop. And seems like he did not stop. So, yikes.
And I think it also just goes to show, like, it's difficult for people to speak up because this is the kind of backlash that they get. They're like, oh, why didn't you speak up earlier, kind of thing. But it's like, people might not feel safe. They might not feel comfortable talking about it or sharing their experiences in the moment that it's happening. It might take a year or 2 years or 3 years to even feel comfortable or even wrap your mind about like what has actually gone on. So I feel like people saying that, like, why didn't she speak up sooner, I feel like is missing the point.
Yeah. And I think that what Jamal said at Tribal Council also really ties into this when he was talking about like, it's not everyone's right to know what happened to a woman who was sexually assaulted. It's not your right to know because you're her friend, because you're her partner, because you ask her about it. The only person who chooses who gets that information is the woman, or I guess the person, because men can also be sexually assaulted.
Yes.
So the person who was affected by that. And I think that's what a lot of people are also missing. Like, just the fact that Kelly ended up having to go through this whole ordeal and have it filmed and be played on television in front of millions of people is that's already really heavy without then having to deal with these other expectations.
Yeah, and I feel
So,
like that is something that we can definitely get into when we talk about production, because I feel like it's definitely problematic there. But I feel like the episode really turned when we see Elizabeth and Missy as the main two people using Kelly's experience as game. Straight up. I
yeah.
was like, when it first started coming on the TV, I was like, wait, is this like actually happening? We see Missy and Kelly, I thought bonding. I was like, oh, cool. They're going to bond over this shared experience. They can become friends. And then we even see flashbacks of Dan like touching Missy, kind of thing. And then it turns, I feel like, when Missy is telling Elizabeth to play up how uncomfortable you are with Dan.
Yeah. Like, when I saw that, I was kind of, not kind of, I was disgusted because I feel like using sexual harassment as a game strategy is simply not okay. People talk a lot about like false accusations of sexual assault, and that's like a lot of the reason why when someone does come forward, they sometimes aren't believed because people are like, oh, well, false accusations of sexual assault happen all the time. And so, in doing what they did, Missy and Elizabeth made light of Kelly's experience because they didn't care what she actually went through. They just were using it as a chip in the game. And then B, substantiated something that doesn't actually happen that often. Like, the amount of false accusations is staggering. scaringly low when you actually look at the statistics. But then the fact that they like played up their own uncomfortableness plays into a harmful stereotype about women who come forward about sexual harassment and sexual assault, and it was just disgusting.
Yeah, 100%, Alyssa, what you just said, I'll echo. Like, literally, honestly, when they were talking with, like, when Janet confronted them after the first tribal, and then they just straight up lied about it. And then they were like, Dan, no, we feel so comfortable with you. We love sleeping next to you, kind of thing. We've never felt uncomfortable with you. And like, they sort of really went back on what they were saying earlier in the day or the episode. And I was like, oh, I mean,
and even earlier in the game, because we've seen
last
several
yes,
episodes where people have talked about how uncomfortable Dan makes them. Like, it's not like this is just a storyline that popped up for this episode. It was present in the first episode. It was present in last episode. I'm pretty sure it's been mentioned at least once in between there as well. Like,
and yeah, and then like them using it as game and then lying about it later, I was like, oh, this is not okay on so many levels because like they're just I don't even know, like it's so hard to put into words like how wrong it is because like
yeah. Like, I've seen people comparing it to like Fair Play and his grandma, like pretending his grandma was dead, and everyone being like, "Oh, that was such a wonderful move." Like, it's just the same thing where you're taking a real life experience and making people like pity you for it, and it's like it's not the same thing at all. It's not the same thing at all, especially because like sexual harassment and sexual assault is something that disproportionately affects women, and like when Johnny Fairplay pretended his grandma was dead, everyone believed him. Like, you don't automatically assume that someone is lying about a death, but then when it comes to sexual harassment and sexual assault, it's always on like the proof of the person who was harassed or assaulted. And there was also this thing where both Missy and Elizabeth kind of said, I was never uncomfortable, so that means it was never a problem. And even if Missy and Elizabeth never were uncomfortable, which kind of seems to go against what they've said in previous episodes, but I'm not them, so I don't know whether or not they were actually ever uncomfortable around Dan. But even if it only was Kelly who was uncomfortable around Dan, that should have been enough where they're like, okay, that behavior is not okay. So,
yeah, they kept on saying like, oh, I only know from my experience, I'm never uncomfortable. But that doesn't, that doesn't translate to other people's feelings about a certain topic kind of thing. So I feel like by them using this as game, it totally discredits Kelly's entire experience because they're just saying like, oh, I didn't feel uncomfortable, so therefore XYZ other people shouldn't have felt uncomfortable. Like, that's not how it works. You're totally discrediting other people's experiences, their stories. So yeah, and just like with the Johnny Fairplay situation, I feel like with that, you're telling a lie or you're making something game that's from your personal life that only affects you necessarily. I feel like using other people's experience to further your game, as in this situation or as in the Jeff Varner and Zeke situation, like these two are where you're using someone else's experience to further your own game. And I think that's where you cross the line.
yeah, and I feel like watching these two episodes play out felt like watching the Varner situation, but if Zeke had got voted out instead. And it was just like, this is the bad place. But yeah, and then I feel like Dan's reaction to it was also super, 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 super gross. Because
Dan at the second tribal council, I was literally flabbergasted when Jeff kept on like asking him the question. And then Dan is like, can we just drop this already? And I was like, what the heck? Like,
It
In
was
what
obvious,
world?
like, he kept trying to make it seem like he was giving a genuine apology, but then, like, you see when Kelly gets voted out, he's like, yeah, put that torch down. And then as soon as, like, he's done with his apology, he expects everyone to move on and be okay with it. And it's like, no, that's not how the world works. There's still things you need to, like, answer for.
I feel like, yeah, there's just something off about him because like he doesn't get the situation, it seems like, throughout the episode. After the like first half of the first episode, there was another black screen where they're like, okay, production talked to all of the players individually and separately and in groups and total group thing, whatever. And then Janet, in like the camp after Kelly gets voted out, she's like, you know, that conversation was about you, right? And it just seems like Dan doesn't get it, and maybe that's production's fault. We can talk about that, like it wasn't clear enough, but I feel like Dan, something, I don't know how he can just be so not aware. And maybe it's intentional, maybe it's not, we don't know, but like something is off.
Yeah. And, like, generally, I try not to pass judgments on Survivor, like, players as people, because obviously we only see one small slice of their character, blah, 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 blah. But, like, it honestly terrifies me that Dan is a man working in Hollywood and self proclaimed most of his clients are female. Like, he cannot honestly be so oblivious about everything that is happening. Like, it seems like intentional obliviousness to play up like, oh, if I didn't know, then it wasn't actually a bad thing. And I really hated what he said in tribal council when he was like, if I ever made Kelly uncomfortable, I'm so sorry. And it's like, she told you on day 3 that you were making her uncomfortable. And obviously you weren't sorry enough to stop. Like,
And also at tribal council, when Dan is saying in his speech after, he's like, can we drop this already, Jeff? When he's saying like, oh, if I've ever touched you while we were walking by each other, or if I ever touched you like in close proximity quarters kind of thing. And like, no, that totally, I feel like, downplays everything, because you're like, oh, it wasn't me who did it on purpose, it was the close proximity that I accidentally happened to touch your rib cage kind of thing. And it's like, that's just so gross, you know? You're sort of like, he's putting the blame on the other person, because it's like, it wasn't my fault that I touched you that way, it was because it was close proximity. Like, you're totally blaming the other forces or the other people. It's like, dude, why, what are you
which
doing?
is especially stupid because they've shown us flashback footage of like him and Kelly together, and it was obvious that he didn't have to like do that thing where he like reached out and brushed her hair behind her ear in like a really weird, like kind of sexual way. He didn't have to like reach out for her head to touch her scalp to see how sandy it was. Like, he didn't have to do any of these things. And the fact that like he stopped when Janet was around is also like a super huge red flag, because the girls were all like, oh my God, I'm so glad Janet's back. He never tries this when Janet is here. And it's like, wonder why he never tries this with Janet.
Yeah, which like obviously we don't know, but I think it's also an interesting point how people pointed out that Dan really only touches the young skinny girls kind of thing. So, not the older ones.
And he also never touches any of the guys, despite the fact that he's in just as close proximity with the guys as he is with the girls, perhaps even more so. So, yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I think this second tribal council, even Dan's speech, all around bad. Aaron talks at tribal council and he says, quote, what's happening now is that the victim role is being assigned by Janet, and instead of taking responsibility, ... kind of thing. And then that part is just wrong on many, many levels, because he's saying Janet is taking the victim role in like that kind of wording, that kind of connotation. He is being very condescending and like delegitimizing everything Janet has said, delegitimizing everything that Kelly has said. And then he continues to go on and he says, quote, "If this was truly a general tribe concern, I would have been involved, comma, Tommy would have been involved, Dean would have been involved." And then the logical part of his argument goes out the window and he was like, "I have a mom, I have a sister." I was like, that does not connect to sexual assault or sexual harassment, but okay.
I love it when guys are like, "Oh, I have a mom, so obviously I can't be a sexual harasser." Like, guess what, guys? We all have a mom. A female was required in all of our creations at some point. So, just saying. And I feel like the only person in that tribal council, other than Janet, who like had any semblance of like thought was Jamal. And I don't really like Jamal as a Survivor player. I have never really liked him throughout this season, but I think that he is one of the most eloquent Survivor players who has possibly ever played the game, especially when it comes to social issues. I think his explanation to Jack about privilege was really spot on, and I think that his explanation this week about a man's role in the Me Too movement and what a man can do when someone comes to him and says that they've been sexually harassed or sexually assaulted was also very spot on, very well thought out, and obviously something that he's thought about outside of the game and not just something that he like made up on the spot. And so I really appreciated everything that Jamal said, especially when he said, like, just because this is an issue doesn't mean that you have to have heard about it. So
yeah, I 100% agree. Jamal at Tribal Council, he's always just so eloquent. His voice is so soothing, calming, and yeah, I agree. He somehow, finds the correct words to say and places them together in sentences that make a lot of sense. I feel like for people who may have never talked about social justice issues in their personal lives. And I thought it was interesting that Jamal speaking at Tribal Council, he was the first person, and this was the first time in the 2-hour episode that the word harassment even came up. And that's where I was sort of annoyed with the episode, that like I felt like they were talking around the subject the entire episode. To say the word harassment in the last 15 minutes of the episode because the tribal council was 15 minutes long, I think that is a fault of the editing. And it's like, how are we supposed to have the conversations about a topic like this if you don't even mention it? Because I feel like Survivor, you have the young viewers, you have the older viewers, and people who may not have had experience or friends, family, siblings, loved ones go and have to go through something like this. And if you're never even going to mention the words, like how are viewers supposed to learn from this?
I wonder if it's like bigger than the editing and if it's just like us as a society, because like sexual harassment and sexual assault have become like such loaded phrases, and as soon as you say one of those, people automatically throw up their walls and are like, no, it's not possible. Like he was just being innocent and didn't know how his actions came off. He's not a harasser. And I feel like that's part of the reason too. Like we ascribe so much meaning to these words. And like not to say that they should ever be used lightly, but I think sometimes we put up too high of a threshold of entry where it's like, oh, he didn't do this, so he didn't actually harass me. He didn't do this, so he didn't actually assault me. But I'm pretty confident in I guess it would have been 144 hours of footage because 2 tribal councils would be 6 days. Someone,
nice math.
Yeah, I'm great at math. Someone must have said the word harassment before then. So yeah, I agree that was a fault of the editors. And I feel like it's one of those things where if you're not willing to say the name of the issue, like Rachel said, that's when people can start being like, oh, the situation, rather than being like, someone on Survivor was accused of sexual harassment and the producers didn't do anything about it. So it
Yeah.
might be just as much covering their own asses as it is an editorial choice.
Yeah. So, in addition to Jamal at Tribal Council, we also see throughout the 2 hour episode Janet getting blasted, literally gaslighted for her choice to do the moral and emotional vote in voting Dan out in the first Tribal Council.
I have a lot of feelings about this. I have a lot of feelings about like Janet as a player and a person. I don't think like she's gotten a lot of respect as a player. I think as a person, everyone's treated her as like the maternal figure, and that's kind of the role that she stepped into. And then that role kind of continues when she's like trying to protect Kelly and trying to protect the younger woman in trying to vote out Dan. And I think that like the fact that people, specifically Elizabeth and Missy, like were willing to take advantage of the fact that she was trying to do something morally good and right despite the effect it might have had on her gameplay, I feel like also made me really grossed out. And as a footnote to our discussion about tribal council, I'm really upset that Jeff never addressed Elizabeth or Missy during the tribal council, because it seemed kind of to be all about Dan, and it's like Missy and Elizabeth definitely enabled, and I guess just enabled would be the word I'm looking for, his behavior by being like, oh no, it's totally okay. And they kind of are getting off scot-free. And I feel like that isn't something that should be allowed. Like, they had just as much of a part in this as, not just as much of a part as Dan did, but they had a large part in it. And letting them get off the hook because they weren't the one inappropriately touching isn't okay either, because it's the culture of bystanders like standing by that allows sexual harassment to continue.
Yeah, I feel like Janet, kudos to her. She did the right thing by being an ally, being an advocate, standing up for Kelly, and then, also being a good example for women everywhere that, like, if you hear a story, like, she never questioned Kelly once about, like, the legitimacy or, like, asking for details or anything like that. But she believed Kelly without any of that, and that's like what you should be doing in these kind of situations. And yeah, I feel like it was interesting at Tribal as well how those people that were enabling Dan were not talked to, because I would have liked to hear their side of the story, maybe, of like why they chose to use Kelly's story as leverage in the game, and then subsequently gaslighting Janet, and then totally like painting Janet out to be the villain. And then everyone on the tribe somehow believes that, like, Janet is the one who is lying about this situation. Kelly going home over Dan is all Janet's fault, pushing Janet to consider quitting the game because Janet just wanted to do what was good for the girls. I was like, this is so gross to watch. This is so sad to watch that, like, other people's actions in such a, like, touch home kind of scenario is like pushing someone to want to quit the game. I was like, damn.
Yeah, I think there was like some level of dramatic irony in the fact that in the second tribal council, Kelly, who was like the center of this, could not speak. Like a lot of people on Twitter and Reddit were talking about like the cinematic parallels almost to like real life
Yeah,
and
straight
sexual
up.
harassment and assault cases about how the victim, Kelly, had no voice. Her greatest advocate, Jamal, was also sent home from the game. And then the person who was doing the harassing, Dan, and his enablers, Elizabeth and Missy, were still in the game. And I was just like, it really be that way sometimes. It really
Yeah.
do.
Like, we get it's a game. The jury doesn't get to talk at tribal until final tribal council. But, like, I don't know. When the whole center of attention was around Dan and then Janet standing up for Kelly and, like, Kelly, I just felt like, yeah, it's sort of gross to not have Kelly be able to say her piece or to talk and to shed light on the situation. And, like, sure, it's a game. Outside information can affect the game and whatnot. But I feel like when you're going into real personal life and, like, touching upon real life experiences like this, to not have Kelly being able to talk at tribal council was a blow. And I think, like, it was just like, because I feel like now going into next week, all of the people still in the game are not going to realize what they've said is wrong, what they're doing is wrong. Like, sure, they've all apologized now, 6 months after the show and, like, while it's airing, kind of thing. But it's like, I feel like these kinds of tropes are going to continue throughout the season, because I literally don't think that the people left on the tribe understand the gravity of what just happened in these 2 episodes. Like, I don't think that they literally understand, like, what they've done is very, very wrong. And I think that just, it's going to be so gross to watch. I feel like it play out and, like, have these people continuously or to continue to blame Janet for everything that's happened. And it's like, no, Janet is not the problem here.
Yeah, if I did not have to continue watching this season to do the podcast, I probably would have stopped after tonight because it was just in so many different ways and just mm, mm.
Yeah, it's interesting because I feel like, Alyssa and I will keep watching, but something like this, I feel like it leaves a black cloud over the season. The people left in the game, not a lot of people left to root for potentially. Like, yeah, sure, missing Elizabeth, they are good players at the game. Aaron is playing the game really hard, kind of thing. But do you want someone like that to have the title of sole survivor and then to get the money and to, like, go down in the history books? I feel like similar to Big Brother 21 this season, after it was apparent that, like, Cliff and Nicole were not going to be going to the final 2, and either, Jackson was probably going to win the game, like, just sort of leaves a bad taste in your mouth for the whole season when someone like that can win money and win a game show and probably get a lot of sponsorships and have a nice life after, knowing that they're having such serious consequences on the real lives of people everywhere.
Yeah. Again, to compare it to the Varner situation, it's like everyone agreed that Varner outing Zeke was reprehensible, and he apologized for it profusely after the fact. And there are still a lot of people who aren't willing to forgive Varner for what he did. And, that's within their rights. And I feel like the same sort of like horror is not being given to what Dan did, despite the fact that Dan also changed someone's life in a negative way for a game. And Missy and Elizabeth both were willing to be complacent in that because they thought it benefited them and got them closer to $1 million. And it's kind of like, I feel like in past seasons, people have asked themselves as they've gotten closer and closer to the final, like, what am I willing to do? Like, will I sell my soul for $1 million,
Yeah.
basically? Like, they've betrayed people, they've backstabbed, they've done things that they probably wouldn't do in their real life, and had to, like, face that down and say, like, am I still me if I'm willing to do these things for $1 million? And I feel like this is a step beyond backstabbing someone in your alliance, because it has a larger impact than just what happens in the game.
Yeah, I feel like that's where it's interesting. Like, how do you balance, like, okay, we're playing the game, but also the seriousness of real life issues, such as sexual harassment, such as outing someone, such as, like, even in Worlds Apart, when they were blasting Shireen and, like, doing really personal attacks. It's like, at what point is it not a game anymore and you're just a shitty person that you're willing to say those things? And then I feel like when it gets, like, if you're, like, using the game as a way to okay the stuff you've said, that's like when you're really crossing the line. Like, oh, it's okay that I said that about sexual harassment because we were playing a game. It was like dot dot dot. No, I don't think that's how it works. But it's interesting. I feel like seeing all of the apology G's that have come out in the past few days, because I feel like I want to know, low key, if they realized while they were still playing the game on the island if what they done was wrong, or are they just realizing it now because of the backlash that happened with the episode? Like, did you actually learn from this experience, or are you just apologizing because America is blasting you because you've done a really bad thing?
Yeah, and a lot of the apologies were like, I didn't realize how bad it was for Kelly, blah, 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 blah. I didn't realize until I was rewatching the episode. And on some level, you have to wonder if that's really an excuse. Like, how far will you let ignorance be an excuse for people? Because, like, Kelly tried to tell them, like, this is what is happening to me. And I feel like ultimately it's one of those things where they did not believe her until America believed her, which was, yeah. The fact that so many of the apologies began with, I didn't realize until I saw myself on TV how bad it was not the greatest. not the best.
And see, that's what makes me so nervous for the rest of this season, because, like, if we're going to have to watch this for the next 4 weeks until mid-December for when the finale happens, like, these people being ignorant to their actions and doing whatever they can to win $1 million, like, I don't think I want to watch that play out on my TV. Like, if we see next week Janet's on the out and she might go home because two people are going home next week and, you know, Janet's on the bottom now, like, that's one of the saving graces of the season, is having people who have morals and will stand up for what's right in a situation. And I feel like if we see Janet get steamrolled next week and continuously bullied or gaslighted, like, I don't want to watch that on my TV, because it's just so hard to see someone, like, suffer through being, like, bullied on TV like that for something that she was trying to do for someone else. And, like, to have the whole situation, like, twisted in a way that it's Janet's fault now, like, come on. I'm just nervous to see that play out.
Yeah. Like, Survivor is like a happy place for me. I don't enjoy it when Survivor makes me feel bad. And, like, yeah, I might feel bad if a player I like goes home, but there's a difference between, like, oh, the person I want to win didn't win this season, which, by the way, I've never made a correct winner pick, so this is a common theme for me. But there's a difference between that and being like, someone on Survivor did something that genuinely made me have to, like, sit down and, like, be angry. It's different. So,
Which I think that's going to be hard, because literally the people in power now and the people left in the game are the people in this posse of being not good people. So I think we can also talk some about production and should they have done more. We see that production does meet, or they said they met with people individually in groups, and they gave verbal warnings to Dan. Dan still doesn't seem to get it. And in the first confessional where we see Kelly crying, production says to Kelly, Kelly, we give you the option. Do you want to take Dan out of the game? And I was like, that's so stupid, because it's a game. No one, like, you would risk your position in the game kind of thing. Like, why would Kelly say, like, yes, I want to pull Dan? Because you are in a game. We see Kelly saying, like, I'm willing to put this past because we are in a game. Like, I don't like that kind of thing. And it's like, I don't know. I feel like production should have done a lot more than giving the option to Kelly in day 20 something. Like, why was this not addressed day 3 when we saw it on our TV screens? And it's like, I low key feel like the show is doing this for views. They're keeping Dan in the game for views. And they wanted this episode to air as is because they want people to talk about the show. You know, they got what they wanted. A lot of people are talking about the show. News sources are talking about the show. And it's like, you made people on this season suffer for views, and you didn't pull Dan from the game. It's like, Kelly is not going to pull Dan from the game.
That shouldn't be the choice you give a player.
Yeah.
You should, as producers, say this behavior is unacceptable. We're going to pull you from the game. Like they did with Brandon and Cara Mullen when they were like, listen, you're getting to a point where like we don't believe that your tribe mates are safe around you. So we're going to give them the opportunity to vote you out. And it's like Kelly's safety, like her emotional well-being, was being compromised by being around Dan. It's obvious from the fact that she had a breakdown as soon as she was alone talking about it. And so it's like, again, they had all the footage to flash back to him being inappropriate with the girls. They had all the footage to show him like putting his arms around them, playing with their toes, like reaching for them, grabbing them, like touching them when they obviously didn't need to or want to be touched. And it's like, how do you see that pattern of behavior and not think maybe we should pull this person from the game? Like, why does someone have to file an official complaint? Because, like, that's their right as producers to say, this is negatively affecting the game, we're pulling you. So, yeah, having that be a choice given to Kelly rather than a decision they made as producers was bad. And then also the bit about, like, them doing it for the views. Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
I mean, right? That's what it seems like, because if you're, as a camera person, as a higher exec producer, whatever, see this behavior, you have filmed confessionals of people talking about this pre-merge. Why is it day 20 something now, merge, and it's become a tribal council issue? Like, why was it not addressed day 1, episode 1 kind of thing? It's like, you're just letting it boil over, and then, okay, great, we have 2 hours worth of television now. We're going to get on prime time. We're going to get millions of views, but you're letting your contestants suffer. Like, people want to go in Survivor for the experience, for the life-changing experience, to find themselves, to play this game for the strategy, not to be sexually harassed for 25 some days.
Yeah. And it's like, yeah, you can agree that people who sign up to be on Survivor sign up to be uncomfortable, but that's like, oh, I'm hungry and haven't eaten anything but rice in 20 days. Oh, I'm really cold. Not the guy who sleeps next to me in the shelter keeps trying to grope me.
Yeah,
Like,
I think production, I don't think this issue should have gotten to where it is now, with Kelly crying about it, with multiple people saying that they're uncomfortable about it. Kelly says Molly was uncomfortable with it too, but Molly was voted out, so too bad we didn't get to hear her side of the story kind of thing. And it's like, y'all, you should have pulled him the first time that something came up, not in the middle of the merge.
or at least given him a warning the first time it came up. Because the fact that he didn't get a warning until this point also was like, I still go back to the fact that literally, like, the very first episode, she told him, like, hey, this is uncomfortable for me. Please stop. And he didn't. Like,
How did he pass the test to get cast?
yeah. Yeah.
So, sad night also. We see Kelly voted out with 2 idols.
Yeah.
And I feel like recently we've seen a lot of female players being voted out with idols in their pocket. Chelsea earlier this season, Kelly tonight, Kelly Wentworth, Aubrey, Andrea, you know, all people being voted out with idols in their pocket. And I feel like, I don't know. Yeah, Kelly, is this the first time since James that someone's been voted out with 2 idols?
Yeah, I think so. I think so.
So it's like, damn. They literally talked about that for 2 seconds. Kelly was voted out, and then it was on to the next episode. And, you know, and then Kelly was silenced because she was voted out.
Yeah. And I think it's so interesting because the whole second episode also basically revolved around Kelly and the fallout from her being voted out. So, yeah.
Speaking of,
the fact that she wasn't there was, yeah.
Yeah. Speaking of, also, Dean is a snake. This I was pissed off about in the episode. I was like, yo, Dean, Kelly saved you last time, and you can't even give her the time of day to give her a little heads up. Like, bro, your name is coming up tonight. Maybe not even a whiff, not even like a scent in the air that something bad is happening. You literally let her out to dry and went back to the people who literally voted Chelsea out, and you're going to be at the bottom of their like 8-person alliance now. So like, I don't know. Dean's ex, maybe good thing they're exes because Dean literally slit Kelly's throat so fucking fast. I was like, dude, you should have at least gave her a heads up.
Yeah. Dean's a snake. Dean sucks. And it's like, yeah, you can argue that's a strategic move, but also
no.
Like,
I think he's the bottom of that alliance. Like, at least, I don't know.
If it was a strategic move, it was a dumb strategic move.
Yeah. I'm like, bro, Dean, come on. So Jamal, also Island of the Idols. This was literally the stupidest Island of the Idols of the season thus far. I'm like, oh, other times I'm like, okay, Sandra and Boston Rob, these lessons are not that good. And then this one really made me see how useless Island of the Idols is. It's literally not even a lesson. He loses his vote before like even stepping on the boat to go to Island of the Idols. And then he gets shat on again by given a parchment and a pencil to make a freaking fake advantage. Like, kick him when he's down. Literally, that stupid fake advantage was never going to work.
I feel like it would have been better if he had sabotaged Dean by like giving him a piece of paper that said like check under the shelter in the middle of the night or something, because then Dean risks getting caught for like trying to find an idol or something. Like, giving him a straight up advantage was not as good of a plan as like giving him a clue or something, because that would have caused him to have to go out and look, and then if he didn't find an idol, he would be paranoid someone else had an idol. And so really he really wasted that opportunity.
And I wonder if Jamal was forced to like announce to the whole entire tribe what happened at Island of the Idols, or could he have pulled someone off to the side and been like, yo, I got this and I have to give it to someone? Because that would make it more believable with your crappy pencil ass handwriting on the piece of paper. Like, doing it in front of the whole tribe, like, sure, maybe it gets a target on Dean's back, but like the thing looks so damn fake that like you're probably not fooling anyone. And like, could Jamal have said no? Because you're not losing anything and you're not winning anything by tricking Dean or whoever he would have chosen. Like, he already lost his vote. He doesn't have the chance to win an idol by tricking someone. So like, What if you're just like, no, that's stupid. It's going to put a larger target on my back. Like, I'm not doing it.
I feel like Rob and Sandra wouldn't take kindly to that. They'd be like, you have to.
And like, yo, no, it's a lose-lose situation. I already lost my vote, and by writing on this stupid piece of paper, I'm not winning an advantage or I'm not getting an idol. So like, why would I was just so annoyed. The episode just got worse. I was like, this is the stupidest Island of the Idols segment ever. There was no lesson. It's like, just don't pick up stuff that you see on the side of a trail now for every future Survivor player.
Yeah. Another thing I just thought about, I was interested that we didn't really get Rob and Sandra's perspective on the whole situation that happened because I feel like that was something that could have been interesting to hear like what they had to say about it because they're kind of more removed from the situation in the sense that like they don't have to interact with these contestants on a day-to-day basis, so they might be less biased. So, yeah. I wish that we could have heard the Rob and Sandra perspective on this whole sitch.
Yeah, so we see Jamal getting voted out, sad night, with two good people getting voted out, with Kelly and Jamal going home. I feel like Jamal was low-key dead in the water since Molly went home, and then we saw Jack go home last week, so like that was his alliance, really. Jamal is probably wishing he didn't play his idol on Nora now, because then he could have saved himself. And Jamal walked out and didn't say bye to anyone. So I was like, okay, savage. I was like, they're not worth it. Some people that you're friends with, like Nora and Janet, worth it to say bye to, but like, screw those other people. Don't say bye and be a badass and walk out of there.
But also, just like with the whole speech he had just given about like respecting women and stuff, it doesn't surprise me that he would kind of like mic drop instead of, you know, saying something that might lessen his previous point.
Yeah. So I'm interested to see how the rest of the season plays out because there is not a lot of people necessarily to root for the rest of the season. The Lyro 4 are somehow in the majority and are probably running the game-ish somehow now. Aaron won 2 immunities this episode. Missy won the second immunity with Aaron, and I feel like that could put a target on Aaron's back for being a comp beast, but who's really going after Aaron at this point of the game, or Aaron can keep winning out. I am nervous.
Yeah. And so, do we want to talk about the spoiler thing?
Yeah, I mean, I feel like we can. 3 people are back in the chat. It went down. So if you all want to hear the spoiler, stay. If you don't, you can exit out. It's a spoiler for what happens next week with Dan.
And it's an unconfirmed spoiler, we should add. This is something that we've heard from multiple sources, but we don't know whether or not it's the truth. So if it ends up not being true, this is our disclaimer too. Yeah. So I think we've stalled enough that people who don't want to hear the spoiler have left. So yeah. Word on the street is that production removes Dan from the game next episode. So I don't know how I feel about that because it feels kind of like what Rachel said earlier, where they just milked him for views. And now that they know he's not going to help them get any more views, they're removing him from the game. And yeah.
Yeah, I feel like low-key, like it's good because he should have been removed probably a long time ago, but also it silences all of the conversation that could be had regarding sexual harassment and sexual assault because like out of sight, out of mind, people will be like, okay, cool, like you can get rid of all of your problems if you get rid of the perpetrator, but like I don't, it doesn't happen like that in real life, it's not that easy. So I feel like by taking him out in an easy, clean production takes him out, it's sort of like, okay, what he's doing is acceptable behavior because we're not having the conversation surrounding it anymore once he's gone. And I feel like we better hope he's not on the jury. I feel like if you're removed by production, you probably should not be invited to the jury, similar to people who like cheat in the game or are violent, so they have to be removed kind of thing. Like, if you quit also, you should not be on the jury. And so Dan should be on a flight home and not on a boat to Ponderosa.
Yeah. And I like looked into some further speculation about it, and apparently on Twitter, Dan has been liking a lot of tweets that are like anti-Karishma, and people
Snoop?
think that
What?
yeah, so people think that maybe Karishma is the reason that Dan ends up getting removed from the game by production. Either like he does something and she like is like this is the final straw, or she like pushes to have him removed from the game or something like that. So that's another bit of like hearsay, but yeah, I think it definitely is too little too late, and I feel like production owes Kelly an apology.
Yeah, okay, multiple things. That's disgusting if he's using Twitter to like heart react other people saying. Like, number one rule of social media, if you have a following or on TV or whatever, like, people are crazy stalker good at finding out your personal information. So like literally by liking those tweets, like anyone can find it. So I'm like, that's just that's disgusting. Like that he would go and like those kinds of tweets. But yeah, I think a little too late for Dan being removed. I think it's a dark cloud on the season, and even by removing him, like Survivor production is literally saying like it's okay to sexually harass people as long as you don't cross this arbitrary line that they just made up to remove him from the game. So it's like you can continue to do it until production gets you, which is not a good message to send.
Yeah. Yeah. This whole thing, I feel like, was kind of just a lot and not in a good way. And I really hope that Dan does get removed just because I don't want to see him on my television anymore.
And
But
send packing, send home, not to Ponderosa.
yeah. That's all I really have to say about next week. And we'll see what else happens.
Yeah, I am interested to see how this all continues to play out. Low key nervous though for next episode because literally all of these people that we don't necessarily want to see win are probably going to go on and win the game. Hopefully, which probably not, they are going to learn from their actions next time, or we see people learning from their actions and realizing the gravity of the situation that has just occurred. But I seriously doubt that because I don't think they realize what they're doing is wrong in very many capacities. So I feel like next week is going to be very difficult to watch on the TV screens.
Yeah, I feel like the rest of the season in general is going to be kind of crappy, but maybe it'll redeem itself. Maybe.
Yeah. I guess if we can get over having someone win the game if you don't agree with their morals.
Yeah, yeah. That's all we have. We know this episode was a little bit heavy, so yeah, please feel free to still let us know what you think in the comments down below. Like we said earlier in this podcast, though, if you like leave us a hate comment, what Rachel and I do is we're like, LOL, look at this person who said this on our YouTube video, and then we laugh about it. So yeah, haters gonna hate, I guess. And if you leave us not a hate comment, we'll probably respond because we have lots of thoughts and we like to share those thoughts with you guys. So yeah, we'll see you next week. Bye.
Bye.